The best way to translate John 1:1 would be, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was divine. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and a lot of people don't like hearing that the second occurrence of the word theos in John 1:1 should be understood qualitatively to mean divine rather than to be identifying the very God of Israel. But it is anarthrous, which means it does not have the definite article, and in the particular kind of predication that we find, the X is Y clause that we find at the very end of John 1:1, that is the best way to make sense of the grammar. Now, you'll have a lot of folks who have established this as the consensus reading of this text, folks like Daniel Wallace and others, who will suggest this still indicates the Trinity, because they presuppose that the God of Israel exhausts the category of deity, that there is no deity beyond the God of Israel. And so to say that the word is theos, divine, would mean the word is the very God of Israel. But that doesn't really fit with how this text would have been understood in the late 1st century CE. And I and other scholars have pointed out that the lack of the article is not just an artifact of the particular kind of predication that is being used here. It is more significant than that. And a lot of scholars have objected to that, say, no, don't look at the man behind the curtain. The lack of the article is insignificant. That doesn't mean anything. You shouldn't read anything into that. But the problem is we have Jewish and Christian authors who not only did read something into it, they explicitly explain precisely why, when the word theos is applied to the logos, the word, you should omit the article. And we can start in Philo in his text on dreams. In book 1, in paragraph 229 and 230, we see this discussion about a passage from Genesis that talks about how God can be used without the article when it is referring to things that are improperly referred to as God. And what Philo means there is only the God, ho theos, with the article, is the very God of Israel. But divinity can be extended to others, and others can participate in divinity without being the very God of Israel, and they are referred to as theos without the article. And Philo even explicitly says that God's chief word, the logos, is referred to as God without the article. And elsewhere, Philo even refers to a second God. And then John seems to be doing the same thing, because it's not just in John 1:1. We also have in John 10, when the author is representing Jesus's enemies, saying, you being human, anthropos, without the definite article, qualitative, make yourself theos. Now, this is frequently translated, make yourself capital G God, and that is a mistranslation, because again, there's no definite article. It should be understood qualitatively, as the parallel anthropos is anarthrous and thus qualitative. So it should be translated, you being human, make yourself divine. There's no article there. It's not saying make yourself the very God of Israel, capital G God. But we have others as well, because we can go to Origen in the 3rd century CE, and Origen picks up on this as well and says in his commentary on John that John omits the article when referring to the word, to the logos, who is not the very God of Israel, but is participating in divinity. And this is also something that, according to the Gospel of John, is going to be extended to all of Jesus's followers. They will all become one with Jesus, just as Jesus is one with God. Just as in John 10, Jesus claims oneness with God, everyone will be able to participate in that oneness and be divinized and be theos, not ho theos, but theos. And there are other scholars who have mentioned this as well, up to the recent New History of John that was written by Hugo Mendez and just published last month. But many of them omit another Christian who I think does the exact same thing. Doesn't explain why they're doing it, but Justin Martyr, in his dialogue with Trypho, when he's referring to the Logos, Jesus, as divine, he omits the definite article. He uses it when he's referring to the God of Israel as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. But when he's referring just to the Logos as Theos, he omits the definite article. And again, scholars have been like, oh no, don't read anything into that. But we see, prior to the composition of the Gospel of John and the centuries after the Gospel of John, Greek speakers and prominent Christian and Jewish thinkers explaining this is significant, explaining that the Logos, the Word, is Theos, divine, not ho Theos, not the very God of Israel. They make a big deal out of that. And scholars these days want to try to ignore that or pretend that that should not inform our reading of John, who also omits the definite article when referring to Jesus or the Logos as Theos. So I think this lends more support to understanding John 1:1 as referring to the Logos as divine. In other words, John 1:1 should be translated, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with the God, capital G God, and the Word was divine. And the fit for this video has been Marvel.